Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on PAS 360, the new BSi Code of Practice. So I'm Jeremy Brim. I've got 20 odd years track record in bid writing, winning deals, and in more recent times, with bidding as my core competence, I guess I've grown into much more things in capture, key account management, and particularly maturity modelling and strategy with boards of businesses. So I founded Growth Ignition almost exactly 5 years ago, last month. We're a transformation consulting, but largely capability development business, all in the work winning space. And so we are able to work with the boards and leadership teams or bid teams of businesses, work winning functions, to determine what your levels of maturity are, what your processes should be, what your performance environment should look like, and indeed train your people and provide digital training assets all the way through from your business planning, marketing, market research, marketing and event strategy, but particularly key account management, capture, obviously the home turf of bidding and what we're here to talk about today, and then also client experience, customer relationship management, net promoter score, customer feedback type stuff. So that's what the business does. I'm, along with colleagues, I think there's a few of the other APMP training organizations on the call. I'm one of the global accredited training organizations with the Association of Proposal Management Professionals, the APMP. There's welcome aboard, everybody. There's lots of people, actually, highly unusually. I've got quite a big community because of the podcast that I do and social media, etc. But actually, probably 2/3 of people who registered for this call I don't know. And so lovely to meet you all. Thank you for coming along. And so why did I start the business, and why did I want to play a part in the APMP's world and this world of bidding? So it's to give back, actually. One of the founding principles of Growth Ignition and the Bid Toolkit, our platform. I've had a fantastic time working in bidding. I've been very lucky to hold some really interesting jobs. My last real job was with Mace, the people who built the Shard and the London Eye, where I led the function of bid writers, bid managers, capture people, graphics people, marketeers, all focused on growing that construction business. And we won Tottenham Stadium, Battersea Power Station, loads of data centers for the big brands, as well as lots of public sector stuff. But that last role, I had lots of people early in their career coming through that I wanted to support in their development. And so I've had a great time through my 20 odd years in this. For me, the rest of my career is very much about helping create an environment where work winning and particularly bidding people have a better life, are more successful, create environments where we're bidding things we could and should win. And so we'll get into some of that as we get into the content and review the content. So it's kind of a core principle, and that's, so for me, very much the work that we do with the APMP as an instance. We are very much aligned in that our cause is to benefit the members. I'm not particularly interested in politics or any shenanigans that can happen in these types of environments. Everyone's competitive. All the other training organizations are competitive. But actually, we must never forget, and one of the core tenets of what we should take away from today is that the APMP is, they've only got a small number of staff. Most of the activity undertaken by the APMP is via volunteers, and we should thank them for their contribution to our discipline wherever we can. And likewise, as you'll see, some of my competitors and peers put a great deal of effort into and should be recognized for that. So let's get into it. We've now got 140 odd people on the call. Welcome, everybody. So talked about myself a bit and about the kind of cause behind the business. Let's get into things. So the approach that I've taken in the run up to this, then, so we'll get into the standard or the code of practice itself, but I should tell you what I've done to try and help shape things. So during the consultation, which many of you should have been party to some months back, much earlier this year, on the consultation document, there was a version of the standard, a draft version, released for comment, which I believe they received 600 odd comments on. Lots and lots of comments, little tweaks, changes. Obviously, we should say this is an incredibly difficult task. And so, you know, we should recognize that, and we'll get on to who's been involved and all of that kind of stuff in a bit. But trying to create a single version of the truth, a kind of source code for bidding, for a whole discipline across multiple sectors, public sector, private sector, and potentially internationally, is a highly multifaceted, challenging thing to do. So I wanted to make sure during that consultation period that some pretty serious senior people got a look at it. And that was a little bit challenging because it came out around the time of a half-term holiday and things, but I managed to get together over a series of calls 16 heads of bids or quite senior people from our discipline, people who had got at least 15 years experience and were leading teams of people, more than 10 or 15 people in their function. And we had a series of focus group calls where we went through that consultation document and compared notes, in effect, for us all to independently go and provide our own comments into the BSi's platform, which we did. Half of those leaders were APMP corporate members, or members with lots of APMP members in their teams. Half of them were not. So we wanted different perspectives on what the standard was about and what was contained within it. I've then subsequently, obviously the standard's been released. I wasn't alerted that it was coming out, but I thought it had another week before it was due to come out, but quickly stood up this webinar and started to advertise it, obviously for my own marketing benefit, but I think because it's the right thing to do. I haven't seen any other launch events, etc. so far. And I really wanted to get eyes focused on this thing and a conversation going about how it can be used. So got this in the diary, and then on the run up, I've released a survey, which we've had 40 people as of about an hour ago. There has been, I think, more people filling it in, but I've only been able to analyze 40 responses. We have got the odd poll that we will run through this session as well, particularly about implementation, if I can figure out how to use that bit of Zoom. So that was the approach that we've taken, to crowdsource as many comments, as many views as possible. I've subsequently, since the release of the document, obviously had lots of WhatsApp messages and conversations with heads of bids, senior people, and many others actually. And so I've shaped this talk today around feeding back what we've found in the analysis through those two major data sources. So overview first of all then. So the PAS was sponsored, but the reason why I mentioned the APMP was it was sponsored by the UK chapter, the CIC, the development vehicle, funding vehicle that members' money is deployed from in terms of innovation. And so they funded, in effect, the work of Bidcraft, one of my competitors, one of the other authorised training organisations, as the technical author, to blast through the thing, working with a bunch of organisations who have been involved in developing similar standards or codes of practice before. The mode of which they went with an accelerated model, where Bidcraft created a draft, put it out on BSi's platform for comment. They got those 600 comments. They've then gone away, analysed those comments, and then have recently, in the last couple of weeks, published a full draft. So that was the approach that was taken. And so the concept itself, we should say, it's a bloody good idea. It's absolutely the sort of thing that APMP should be supporting. It's absolutely the sort of thing we should do. You know, I tend to say in our business that we try to not allow ourselves to have competitive competitors. You know, we try to innovate and be out front as much as possible. It's kind of in the DNA of our business, but we do have to applaud and recognise where competitors do good work. And we often, you know, talk about some of the good work that Strategic Proposals do, for instance, John's gang and others. And you have to say, you know, Bidcraft's idea here is a very good one, as alongside their other idea of the International Bids Day as well, the sort of celebration of our sport. So you have to applaud that. Fair play to them. So this should be like a free source code, as it were, for bid functions. And perhaps it should become, let's decide later, I think, but perhaps it should become a full BSi standard. So bear in mind, we do have to be clear, because I was unclear on this during the consultation, and only when it was released did I realise that this is not a standard, this is a code of practice. So clients cannot say to you, you have to have this standard in place to be able to bid to us. The concept of a full BSi standard, which this could move to and become accredited for, is that it becomes a proper accreditation, much like an ISO 9001 in quality management, and that therefore you can go as a business, get that accreditation and prove to clients that you are competent and capable of stepping through an appropriate bid process, and that they will receive bids of an appropriate quality for probably largely major procurement exercises. That's not what this is at the moment. It's a voluntary code of practice. It should be a free source code that you're able to download from the BSi site. Hopefully, I know a lot of people have struggled to get hold of a thing, but you can. They've fixed the site. You can get hold of a copy, and be able to look at that, and particularly some of its elements, maturity model, etc., and be able to measure where your business currently is, and be able to see off into the future how it can develop, how you could invest in your bidding function for the benefit of your business, which is always a good idea. So the concept is a good one. We do need to talk about the context, though. So many of us, I do recognise some of the people on the call, like my friend Alison, a very large, interesting architecture firm, beautiful minds. There's a few great people on this call, but most of the people that I know work in pretty mature organizations where I am helping them move from being in the top 10% to into the top 5%, perhaps. But actually, by statistically, I guess, most people that work in bidding and most bid functions are not in that space. Actually, what we find from our research, most organizations are wildly immature. The general maturity in winning work spectrum wide is extremely low on average across the piece. So we ATOs are generally very spoilt on average that we get to work with companies that are fairly mature and are looking to improve. But actually there is a huge proportion, wild proportion, 80% of businesses or more probably, that have to bid for work, B2B or B2G, who are bidding everything. Their bid teams are kind of death by 1,000 cuts, running red hot. There's no decent qualification of opportunity. There's no robust bid process, people working late nights, lots of heartache, lastminute.com efforts, bloodbath reviews, if you have any reviews at all of that kind of stuff. And we're a bit spoilt. We're not really party to that as often as perhaps we might be. And so, yeah, the maturity of people work, the approach taken by most people working on bids, or the environment in which they work, is pretty low in terms of its maturity. There's only a tiny proportion of organizations that are elite in this stuff, and what the standard or what the code of practice is trying to put across as the good practice to emulate. And so how you pitch, therefore, this code of practice is quite a challenge. And I feel for Bidcraft in trying to pitch the right level here. And I think in many ways they've done a good job. There's some things perhaps, as we'll get into, that we might want to change. But in terms of levels of maturity, for instance, we've done some market research recently, and there are 800 people a month search for the term bid writing training in the UK, but there are only 50 people a month search for capture management at all, let alone for training. And so that tells you that everybody's focused on the end game, and as we'll get into on some of the standard stuff, actually how you really win deals at scale and accelerate your win rate is through thinking through upstream, good qualification, decent capture of your strategic pursuits, key account management of your top clients that probably dictate 80% of your margin anyway. So we'll touch on that again in a bit. So yes, this new code of practice proportionally will be a quantum leap forward for most organizations that need to bid for work, but the medium to high performers might not feel that way about what's been put down in the document so far. So always a difficult balance, these things. And as I say, we've got to give credit to Bidcraft and the APMP. This is absolutely the right thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do, crowdsource all of this thinking, bring it together in one document. But as we'll see, from the feedback we've got, there's a bit to do. So in terms of what it is and what it isn't, then, as I say, it is a code of practice, not a full standard. It is for bid functions and strategically how you land a high performing bid function in an organization. It is not a bid process because it's a code of practice, and it is not aimed at individuals. It's aimed at an organization level, just to be clear. So this is not interchangeable with the APMP or the body of knowledge. It's not interchangeable with the APMP exams, and actually what you'll find is it's not particularly aligned with those things, which is a little bit of a challenge, and perhaps not correct. But fundamentally, it's a different thing for a different level. This is about, it should be about how you use this to convince senior people in your business that they need to invest in a bid function, structure it appropriately, strategically, tactically, invest in it and its capability and development, to get better rewards, return on investment, much higher win rates for the business. So I hope everybody's clear. That's what it is. And again, I've had a load of people join. We're up to 160 odd people. So please do feel free to use the Q&A function. I think the chat function is disabled, but Q&A is open. So please do feel free to ask questions as we go. So some of the things we found in the survey, I have to say, it was quite interesting. So 40 people have answered. I would say 25 to 28 of those answered more than a few days ago. And then I had a sudden flurry, much like registrations for this call, had a sudden flurry of people filling the thing in yesterday. And interestingly, the people that filled it in earlier on, were fairly dramatically negative. Oh, hello, can you hear me? Let me know if anybody else has lost sound. Claire's lost sound by the looks of things. Hopefully others can hear me. Let me know. I'll carry on going. Oh, Rita can hear me. So yeah, that must be you, Claire. Apologies. We can hear you fine. Excellent. Sorry, we'll carry on. So I did get quite the people that answered the survey earlier. There was some fairly dramatically negative stuff in that. And then the people that answered it in the last 24 hours, there was some fairly dramatically positive stuff in that. And I don't really know how to feel about that or what that means. It's just an observation, but I just thought it was interesting. So we'll run through some of this stuff. One of the things that's played out, which is a little concerning, is that 15 of those 40 people provided consultation document comments, and those comments were either possibly implemented, or 10 of those, so 2/3 of the people that provided comments, their comments were not implemented into the published version. So that's a slight concern, I have to say. That now the thing is, we don't know, having not been involved in its development or its real review of all the comments, etc., what the BSi process is that's followed. So I'm not going to get into negging, people that are involved in this. I don't know what the environment is, but certainly I can see from my review of the published version versus the consultation version that only half of the comments that I certainly put in, that were very similar to the comments of lots of my peers as ATOs and also leaders of functions that I'd got on those consultation groups. Now only half of our comments were implemented. So I am going to, you'll see later in the actions, but I'm going to provide the base data out of the survey to the APMP and the BSi. As part of this. That by the way was the actual survey in form. So you can see I've had 40 people and I've literally ripped these straight out of it. That's why it's not pretty. And so we also, I asked, how likely do you think your organization is to implement? And I'd called it a code of practice at that point, and hadn't actually read the thing at that point. And actually that's quite spread. So that's nice to see. I should say the positivity, the very virtue that we've got 160 odd people on this call, 300 odd people, registered, is a big deal. It's a really positive thing to see that people are interested. I can see you've got your hand up, Mark. Can you write me a little note in the Q&A first, and I'll come back to you. And so it's fantastic to see such positivity around a new thing in bidding. It's important that we land this right in the market and with our leaders, and so that's really nice to see a good spread of whether people will or they won't at this point, and hopefully it does catch fire and it does get implemented. How satisfied were you with the approach that was taken? So quite a lot. I think there were quite a lot of people that were not involved or didn't see the consultation happen at all. Certainly from some of the written responses we've got in some of the other questions, people just didn't know. User error, Mark, no worries. People just didn't even know that it happened. So in fairness, I think the APMP did everything they could in advertising it. There were plenty of posts and things. It did happen largely over a half-term holiday in the UK. I think most people on the call are in the UK. So perhaps lessons learned for next time we do something like this, we would think through timing and publication at least of what the consultation looks like. So I have ripped straight from Microsoft Forms these word clouds, which sort of work and sort of don't. So it's kind of a thing, but so you can pull some of this stuff. So what would people like to have been done differently, not done over a half term, wider consultation? So I know quite violently, really, myself and people like Mr. Williams at SP were asking that senior people, not just us as ATOs, but we're asking that senior people were engaged in this process for a review, and particularly after the quality of the consultation document and the great number of comments on it. I had particularly asked for the board, the global board of APMP, to individually review the thing. And I don't know, I've not at the moment. I'd asked for the standard to be put on a town hall meeting of us ATOs that took place on Tuesday last week, but unfortunately it didn't have the right people involved, so it hasn't happened. I understand that we are going to be engaged by the association on this very subject in the not too distant future, but I'm just waiting for it to get in the diary. Remember, small team, volunteers largely involved in the thing. We can't be harsh on this. People are trying to do the right things for members. So but perhaps there's some lessons learned. I don't know whether they were following a quite specific BSi approach that meant that they had to do things in a certain way. So let's try and give people benefit of the doubt. But there was some stuff in there in terms of engaging international chapters. There was some comments around its alignment or not with the APMP's body of knowledge and all of that kind of stuff. And so, and a change log. So we can't see between the consultation document and the release document which comments were invoked and which weren't. So it would have been nice to see that sort of change control, I guess. But lessons learned and all that. What improvements could be made to the document that's been published then? So again, loads of keyboard Karen stuff on this. People have given up their time. Bidcraft have been paid to do this, we should say, so it should be a really professional job, but they have done it in isolation for whatever reason. As you'll see when we get into some of my content and other feedback, there's things like reference to capture in there. It doesn't talk about capture at all, which I find really odd, and was one of the comments before. There's loads of stuff, so we'll get into the detail and see where it goes. So I hope you've been able to access the document. The heart of it is 36 pages, well, probably 27 actually in terms of the core content. It is a worthwhile read. There were problems in accessing it. There were problems with BSi's site when they first launched it. I got told off because I've shared it as a download link from my OneDrive and things like that. BSi got in touch and told me off about their copyright and all that sort of stuff, to which my answer was, well, should have included me in the first place then. But such is life. So I'm trying to have a dialogue with BSi about the improvements, and we'll come on to the actions later in terms of what we do to make sure that this thing really flies. So in terms of the document intro itself, so it lands this diagram, which I'll probably get in trouble for lifting out the document, copyright and all that, but anyway, such is life. So it lands this business development and delivery life cycle at the heart of the introduction of where bidding fits in the sort of work winning cycle. So that's a new invention. I've never seen it before. None of my senior colleagues that I've ever met have ever seen this before. And so we assume Bidcraft must have created this themselves. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just we don't know what empirical evidence has been used to formulate this. But it's not, slightly awkwardly, it's not industry best practice. It's not aligned with the wider business development life cycle that you can Google. It's not aligned with the sort of stuff I do where I teach at Cranfield on MBAs and things. And it's not aligned with what we have in the APMP's body of knowledge and what we teach for foundation in terms of the APMP's view of the business development life cycle. So that's a bit odd. I look forward to hearing back when we provide feedback on why that is. I don't necessarily think it's wildly wrong. It's just there are, in this context, it just needs explaining to us. But there's a conversation to be had, from my life in where I'm working with boards and businesses in how they sustainably grow their business over time. 80% of most B2B, B2G businesses, 80% of their work, comes from 20% of their clients as a rough rule of thumb. And therefore, that means that you should look after those clients, i.e. key account management, and that you should capture your rebids more than you capture new business with new clients. And your bid team, their most important bids and the bids they face most should probably be either recompetes or bids with clients you already work for. So you shouldn't be arrowing out new clients, new business. You should be more focused, if anything, at your current crop of clients with an assessment of which clients will be your key clients in 5 years' time and all that sort of stuff we work on and coach people on all the time. So it's a bit odd that it doesn't reflect that. It's also a little bit of a watch out with the new UK procurement regulations being released next year. It's just made it through the Houses of Parliament. If you're public sector-ish in the UK or regulated industry, I don't think the world's going to violently change for us, but some things, there'll be some tweaks and things in how procurements work. And so we need to be aware of that. But it's certainly the ever increasing requirement for teaming and alliances is becoming a thing. And you're picking your partners for particular CCS frameworks and teaming, and for particular alliances, look into the FAC1 form of contract and the gold standard for frameworks. All of the language comes to clients doing bigger procurements and procuring groups of organizations in alliances, standard design components and that kind of stuff in construction. For instance, you'll see that there are some pilots like the prisons program currently where they've procured a group of contractors together in one vehicle to deliver 5 prisons. That's going to be the kind of model you see, not just in construction, but across the piece. So I'd like to see some recognition of that world of teaming and alliances in here, as well as frameworks and the difference between bidding frameworks themselves or mini bids and all of that kind of stuff. And of course, it misses, there's reference to presentations later in the document, but it doesn't reference presentations, assessment centres, all of that kind of stuff. So I guess where I'm going with this, and as you'll see through the content, is this a document you could stick in front of your chief exec today and say, we need to jump to this code of practice, invest in my team, these are the rules of the road by which our team should operate? No, I don't think you could do that. I think you could say this is a change we're seeing in our discipline, a positive step with some builds. We should look to align with this thing. But at the moment today, I wouldn't want to go through the detail with a CEO myself, and you'll see why. So as I say, upstream of bidding in our model, this is a sort of diagram we use with clients all the time to explain how to join the dots through the sales funnel, because bidding is the end game, very important end game. You've got to put the ball in the net, but actually there's a lot of activity in terms of strategic pursuits, in terms of capture, how you manage your pipeline and qualification of pipeline, and particularly how you look after your key accounts to make sure that you have a good backbone of a business, that you can try to focus as much as possible on negotiation of deals rather than competitive tenders. And so, there's some work to be done there. Vicky said a lot of APMP emails go into junk mail, so perhaps members didn't review that. Yeah, that's quite possible. And Alison says this feels a bit Shipley-ish. I would say, Alison, it's not enough Shipley-ish, actually. We'll come to that in a bit. Lovely to have you on board, though. In terms of the next section of the document, then terms, definition, abbreviations, I got absolutely besieged with comments on this: text messages, WhatsApps, emails, stuff in the survey, all sorts, LinkedIn messages. So some people, a little bit unhappy with this bit. So on the roles, it has descriptors of some roles in the definitions, abbreviations bit, and it has some roles towards the back end of the document as well in one of the appendices. I don't want to get too far into the detail, because, to be honest, there's so many things you could personally want to change in this document. We'd be here forever. And of course, everybody's got a different view. We've got to pick a line somewhere. But for me, and for many others, there are a few key roles missing here. So sponsor, for instance, or board director, whoever's accountable at board level for the submission of your key deals in particular. Sponsorship, we talk about all through our different courses in CAM, capture and bidding. It's the biggest defining factor we find in our research in the sustainable, predictable growth of organizations. If you have good sponsorship, somebody on the board that is what I call a 5%er, they're spending a small proportion of their time just checking in with bid teams, capture teams, being the sponsor on key accounts, attending certain meetings with clients, etc. You get a top-down, bottom-up effect. Top-down, you will find your bids will be properly resourced because somebody senior is engaged and says so. You will find that the opportunity is spoken about at the right levels in the business. So, things unlock for you. People will be more willing to help you out. But you get bottom up as well. You get fellowship in the business. So your junior people, certainly, if they know somebody senior is going to see it, be involved in it, subconsciously or consciously, they will be drawn to wanting to be involved. They will support the adoption of good practices where you're working on bids and want to be seen as part of winning deals. So it's missing. I put this as one of the comments in the consultation, and it's not been implemented, but it's the most important thing and should absolutely be in this code of practice. Every bid needs a sponsor. If it's worth bidding, it's worth being well sponsored. If it's lots of little mini bids to the same client, you might sponsor it as a CAM activity, as a program, but you need somebody senior who's got a watchful eye and supporting what's going on. Equally, interestingly, and there could be debate, it's one of those things there could be debate on forever, but the document very much outlines that a bid manager is accountable for resourcing on the bid, for instance, as in the technical resources, the budget for the bid, the people that come to work on the bid. They are responsible for going to the business and getting those resources applied. I know almost nobody that has that accountability, whose job is a full-time bid manager. Bid functions are not accountable for that in the markets largely that I've worked in. I very rarely, you do come across it now and again, but very rarely do you find somebody who certainly is a full-time bid manager. It's their professional job. They're an APMP person, and they have accountability for the budget and certainly for what resources should be applied to a bid. Generally, that's a bid director. In most places I work, outsourcing, IT, construction, professional services, and so I find that one a little bit odd. I think that needs review. And classically, proposal writer is mentioned in the R&Rs later in the document, but bid writer isn't mentioned in the key roles in the terms, definitions, abbreviations, which of course probably half of APMP members are bid writers. So there was a bit of uproar about that. Similarly, bid coordinators. And again, I know John at SP in the original consultation was mentioning that there's no mention of graphic designers, desktop publishers, etc. Again, there's great numbers of those, and in fact, of course, slightly ironically, we've just as APMP and the associated trainers released a new micro accreditation in graphics, which is 45 pages long apparently in terms of the bits of the body of knowledge. So missing some roles, and I recognise some people might have taken that personally. Try not to. Everyone's trying to do the right things here, but I think that does need a little bit of thought. And so I'm coming to your point, Louise, on SMEs. So do I have a link to the document? Yes, I'll send a link out. It was in an email you would have received today, actually, Louise. There is a link to be able to download the document now from their site. So people saying in the Q&A, slightly concerned that there's jobs missing, etc. And quite right, particularly interesting, Gemma, you're saying that because I think you're one of the trainers on the apprenticeship stuff. No mention of apprenticeships in this too. So there's also classically, John could weave a wonderful tale forever about the difference between bid management and proposal management. Shouldn't be interchangeable. There's a whole argument you could have there. Not the easiest thing to solve. It does mention the term proactive bidding, which I've never heard of, and nobody senior that I know has either. I think what they should be talking about is capture or proactive proposals. Those are two very different things, and so let's keep that separate. So that's definitely a note. I don't know what they mean by that. There is also a watch out, and part of this is because they've tried to spin it internationally. So it's ready for the States. It's even in American English, which, bearing in mind the UK chapter paid for it, was not ideal, and lots and lots of comments on that. So watch out for SME as in small medium enterprise versus SME as in subject matter expert. In the UK, with SMEs as in small medium enterprises being involved in social value, etc., we need to be a little bit careful of that. And then there's a conversation, I think, to be had about the difference between what they refer to as win themes, what's referred to as win themes in certainly the UK market, and then proposal theme statements, which is actually what we're measured on in APMP Foundation, and whether those are the same thing, different things. It seems a little interchangeable in the document, so just a bit of a watch out. So the bid proposal management section 4, generally it's all fine. You could put this in front of someone senior and they'd generally catch the drift, I think. I just think we're mixing our drinks a little bit here in terms of what's genuinely strategic and what's tactical and then what's just delivery. So read it for yourself. I'm sure you may have. I think the stuff they're talking about that's strategic is actually tactical. The stuff they're talking about that's tactical is actually BAU. Strategy should be about how the function is positioned in the business and its sphere of influence and how it drives the business and how it's going to regulate the pipeline and getting engaged in pipeline meetings and the direction of the business and how we're going to enable the business. That's strategy for me. But figure it out yourself. You're all very bright people, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So there's then the introduction to bid and proposal management function principles. So there's the introduction of this concept of 5 pillars, which was a surprise to everyone I've ever met on this stuff. It's a new invention, clearly by Bidcraft. It's not a bad idea, makes sense. But again, there's no sort of evidence as to how this has come about. It's not been engaged with us. It's not been engaged, I don't think, with anyone senior in the discipline. And it's not aligned with the APMP body of knowledge again. So, and also the comments that were placed in the consultation about this, which were many, were just ignored. So I don't know, I think ignored is probably a bit strong, but certainly weren't implemented. And so because there wasn't another dialogue round, and some engagement, perhaps round tables, this kind of webinar to engage people on it, get feedback. Don't know where it's come from. Makes sense, but it's just a bit of a missed opportunity. I think this could be a model that we drive into the industry, but don't know where it's come from. Would be good to understand it a bit more. So that'll be part of the feedback I think that we provide. Slightly differently though, so this maturity model that's placed into this section, the concept of maturity modeling isn't new at all. As a quasi-management consultant back in the day, used to use this sort of stuff with clients all the time. But the content in this one is new and is a little tricky, I find. So there were plenty of comments placed about this in the consultation document, which is, again, that have not been taken on. So it's not linear or detailed enough. The point of a maturity model is you show what, and as I'll show you in a second, what perhaps bad, average, and high performance looks like. They've got sort of 4 levels here, but those descriptors should build on each other so that it's linear. You're moving along a journey, and this doesn't feel like that. It feels a little bit clunky. So it makes sense, but again, I think it's a missed opportunity to provide a really effective baselining tool. I think instead of vendors coming up with their own online tools for this. Perhaps the APMP should have provided a tool and we should have inputted to it. You'll catch a vibe with me, a general feel that I think that the APMP's trainers like me, other vendors like AI platforms and things, and particularly fellows, senior people, employed people in the market, should be helping develop this IP for the benefit of members, perhaps rather than as marketing tools. So there's not enough detail there for you to meaningfully use it, and it's not linear either. So that's a bit of a shame. But along those lines of being a vendor and wanting to sell you stuff, we do provide maturity modeling workshops that are 2.5, 3 hours, where we take you through what bad, average, and high performance looks like and highlight where you are, build a plan to how to improve for business plan, market research, business planning, CAM, capture, bidding, and client CX, to give you a properly rounded view and with benchmarking and best practices, how to move forward. So I would prefer to see something, I think you'd get more value from using something like that, but I would say that, wouldn't I? Then bid and proposal management principles. So it's quite a big section, this one. You need to read it, but there's really good depth of content here. It's a good start, but there are there's an infinite level of detailed comments that I've got on it that people have put it through, but I would be here all day if we were getting into the detail and sort of yin and yang and that. So I'll just give you some headlines. There isn't an interrelationship with business plan, CAM, and capture noted in it, which is a slight concern. Two massive concerns for me, which are proper day-to-day stuff that every professional bidding person should be engaged in, is that it's fundamentally missing anything. And I know it's not a bid process, but it does talk about kickoffs. It does talk about, reviewing, but it doesn't talk about storyboarding, as I would call it, content plans, as perhaps APMP would call it, answer plans, some people call it. And it doesn't talk about outlining either. What's the chassis of your document going to look like? How's the signposting going to work? A lot of my colleagues get very into how the document works, etc. To be honest with you, the two of the 3 to 4 biggest ways that companies lose bids on quality submissions are these two things. They don't storyboard effectively, so they're not answering the question, not meeting the scoring criteria, etc., etc. And that's what 80% of businesses that bid for work plus don't storyboard, and that's why they don't win on bids, don't win on quality, etc., etc. It is the app. So along with solution, which is key to winning both in terms of quality submission and commercially. And I must say, there's a lot of good stuff in the code of practice document about solutioning, technical solution, commercial solution. So fair play, and unusually, because there's not a lot on that, or there didn't used to be a lot on that in the APMP's body of knowledge. And it was kind of a USP for me that certainly in capture, we're talking a lot about solution and co-solution, because I'm trying to get people to negotiate deals, not bid them at all. So solution is extremely important, and it's well done that they've covered that, because it's not really been covered as much as I'd like before. But storyboarding, man, that's what bidding people spend a great deal of their life doing and should do, and it's what we're excellent at. So I would expect that to be in there. So that's a strong piece of feedback. And then the document talks about review, but it's literally a bit of text about that big on a page. So that's not really where we should be. We, clearly in the marketplace, they probably can't talk about Shipley's classics of different coloured reviews, pink, green, red, and all that. But we need, in our model, we talk about it in percentages, so I don't get sued by Shipley or whatever. But we have a 25% review at the end of solution and story. We have a green review, first draft review. Sorry, not green, 60% review. 60% of the way through your bid program, direction of travel, health check, etc. And then obviously the classic, what others would call a red review, we call an 85% review. 85% of the way through. I'm surprised they haven't done a bit more detail about at least having a decent red review, and certainly commercial review. So that's quite jarring for me, quite important for us, that we can't go and take a document to our chief execs or leaders of our businesses and say invest in our bid team and not have something in it about storyboarding effectively and reviewing effectively. Any senior person who knows anything about bidding would expect to see that. So let's do that. One thing that really did, you know, I won't use swear words. I've given up swearing. Many of you that know me will know that's quite a challenge. But the bottom bit of this is almost offensive. And anyone you ask, anyone senior, wholeheartedly disagrees with this last little statement. So it basically says if it's a run-of-the-mill bid, you can kick it off by email. If it's important, have a proper kick-off meeting. I'm sorry, no, that's absolutely not appropriate. We are asking people to come and give up time, effort, utilization, put heartache into writing a bid with us. You cannot ask them to do those things for you by email. That's just rude, and it will not get you the outcomes that you're looking for. It's not best practice. It's not appropriate. So no, you can't kick off a bid by email. So please don't do that, and don't tell any of your senior people that that's a good idea, because it will lead you down a path that you don't want to go down in terms of quality. So I recognise we're blasting through time here. So, as you know, share it with your leaders. Not yet. Have a bit of a build. However, and I would say this, wouldn't I? We own the bid toolkit that you can find at thebidtoolkit.com, which is an online bid process and guide with training videos and tools to download baked into it. It's not a code of practice, but it is a bid process, a standard bid process that you can take inspiration from, and it runs through a life cycle that is very reminiscent of Shipley type stuff, APMP type stuff, and actually the training videos that are baked into it are APMP Foundation accredited, and we have a specific APMP Foundation video that you can hire for those purposes too. So it does have clear roles and responsibilities in it, what the attributes are and what the responsibilities are for a number of hero roles, including sponsor and bid manager and bid leader. And so you are very welcome to use that in your conversations with leadership. And we'll talk later about other ways that you can leverage that. Very, very happy for you to. We do also, by the way, provide enterprise versions of the bid toolkit to clients. We have a number of clients who have their own bid toolkit site baked into their intranet or passworded external sites, which is their digital bid process with their digital video-based training. So if they've got someone going to a storyboarding workshop in a couple of days, they can send them the link to that phase. And when they turn up to that workshop, they will have watched the video, reviewed the content, be at their peak performance. But anyway, so let's go. So building the case for change then. So there was a lot of good stuff recently. Martin, my mate Martin, I think is on the call, owns Bid Solutions, their BQ publication. I can't remember. I think he's got like 30 or 40 experts that write articles for this thing now. It's the most comprehensive publication in the world in bidding. And I was lucky enough to be asked to write one of the articles in how you measure your baseline. So if you are looking to implement this change, there's a great number of you on the call. You're probably here for a reason. You're interested or you're looking to implement change in your bid team. You've got to set a baseline first of all. So understand how to measure where you are, and then you can build some KPIs to see where you're going. And again, you know, maturity modeling is a good idea. It's just, do you use the business development maturity model that's available online, or engage someone like me, or use one of the other online tools? Needs to be focused on value. It's all about the value to the business. What's the return on investment in landing a change? And that sponsorship is absolutely critical. As I said, you will not get the change to go if you don't have somebody senior behind you. And we talked about this. I gave these slides as a talk at the APMP BidX Big One, the conference in Birmingham the other week. You know, think through using proper change management. If you want to land a change, you want to leverage the standard or the code of practice once we've got it tweaked a bit. So you need to think through the organization design. So what will the implementation of the standard mean for your team and the roles and responsibilities of others in the business that input to bids, influence bids, stakeholder engagement in that, how you're going to do that, communications, and clearly how you're going to train people and enable people to be able to deliver. And so you need to underpin that with L&D best practice. So bear in mind, the world of training has changed quite a lot in the last couple of decades. You know, we're not being trained to work in factories anymore. And so learning needs to be, as well as using structured learning at the start, we need to inject interventions, different types of social learning on the job learning at the point of need where people are because of digital distraction, etc., etc. And try not to notice that this lady hasn't got her actual pen nib out, so she's not writing anything. Anyway, so it's worth studying the principles of 70-20-10 learning and development principles if you want to land a change. So actually, we humans only pick up 10% of our competencies and skills in structured learning on training courses, and we can only retain 10 to 20% of it 72 hours later if we don't make it sticky. And so how we make it sticky is through recognizing that actually 70% of our skills and competencies are acquired on the job, making mistakes, experimenting, learning. That's why we're not chimps anymore, because we learned how to make tools and practiced and all of that kind of stuff. And then social learning in the middle, in terms of role modeling, mentoring, modules of graduate leadership development programs, that kind of stuff. And so we provide capability in all those spaces. So I can come and teach you in a meeting room or online. We can stand up both passive and active social learning, internal webinars, podcasts, parts of your intranet, graduate development program modules, all of that kind of stuff. And obviously we own the bid toolkit and enterprise sites, so we can inject learning on the job. And so you can think through how you might do that internally, or you can ask for our help or one of the other ATOs, etc. But you do, whatever you do, just conscious of time, you do need to measure the benefit. So we need to measure the successes, keep reporting that and showing that to senior management in data form and anecdotally, successes, lessons learned, and make sure you hold on to that sponsorship and good role modeling so nobody undermines that change. So in terms of next steps then, so you're very welcome to pull us in to help you with the maturity modeling piece to understand where you should go next. You're very welcome to visit our website, where you can see the full stack of what we do in terms of assessment against the new PAS standard and how you might implement it or parts of it. So you'll get a link to that in a follow-up email. And you are more than welcome. We're going to put a new bit of the website for power hours where you can literally book in the time in my diary for a small charge. And so you're very welcome, before we get that set up, to send me an email and we can set up a meeting if you'd like to talk specifically about PAS or indeed any other form of change for your business. And by the way, I pitched for one of the global board member roles that was advertised recently with the APMP. And my pitch was that I would like to help them implement a senior quality commission of fellows and senior bidding people employed, and maybe the odd ATO, to review any new initiative, any new certification and things like PAS, so that they are of an appropriate quality before release. And then I also have talked to Rick, the chief exec, and others about an ATO channel partner program. So they're leveraging people like me for the benefit of members like you better, and that we are all trying to market and sell membership to a wider community to get it driven far beyond the 5 to 10%. APMP's got 13,000 members, I think, something like that. There's probably 250,000 people working bids at least, so it's penetration fairly small. So we need to do more. We need to help more people in bidding understand what good looks like. So I'll do Q&A in a second. I see there's some questions, running out of time, but just quickly, in terms of next steps then, because this ain't the finished article, but I want it to be, and many others do, this needs to be a positive experience. We need to help the APMP and BSi drive forward something positive for our discipline, because it's a great idea, right? Although there's lots of negative stuff or tweaks we'd like to see, this concept is a great idea. So let's do that. So the recording of this session, the data from our feedback survey and feedback will be issued to the APMP and BSi later today or on Monday. I'm trying to engage the BSi to drive an update fairly fast, and I know others are doing so too. And then I think, if you wouldn't mind, it'd be a good idea if we get back together again and have a further webinar in late January, early February to update you on where we're up to. And perhaps I'll invite someone from the APMP, Bidcraft or BSi or all of the above to talk us through where we go from here. Because hopefully, if you read the document, at the start of the document, it does talk about how it's open to update if authoritative people give them reason to. I think there's plenty of those. So I think we should be able to get it to a place where it's easily adoptable. Don't get me wrong, there's really good stuff in it that you can take from it. It's just you've got to filter it. I wouldn't put it in front of a chief exec today. So just quickly, I'll do Q&A in a second. More to come from us. So we will be launching a marketing training program or series of programs, Marketing 101 for non-marketeers, social media marketing, etc., as part of our wider business growth program, which has training modules in all of this stuff: business planning, marketing, CAM, capture, bidding, CX. I am asking my fellow ATOs if they'd like to do the bidding bit for their clients and introduce me for the other bits for the others. So there's a focus group for that on the 24th of November. So you'll receive an invitation for that. You're very welcome to join us, fill in a little survey, join us, and you'll get a 20% discount on the program. Bigger discount if you're a current client or friend, Alison. And we are going to start running open free drop-in sessions for work winning and bidding professionals. I can't remember the date I put it in for, but you'll get an email about that in the coming days and weeks. So you can drop into those once a month and we can have a chat, Q&A type stuff in this kind of forum. Hopefully you found that useful. And lastly, we can do power hours, as we say. Chuck me a few quid and you can pick my brains, or I can point you in the right direction. So Q&A stuff very briefly. Thank you, you've nailed it. Thanks. Oh, thank you, JW, you're a top lad. But there's too much needs changing before generally reflects. Yes, you're quite right, John. No problems, Claire. Thank you. Haven't read it, but knowledge management should also get a mention in the code. There is a bit on knowledge management actually towards the end of the document. Thank you, Mark, for sharing the link where people can download it. Very helpful, because lots of people had struggled with that. Relating to PubSec bids, is there any feeling how each devolved government will apply the code of practice in their procurement? From Peter. So Peter, I can't see any client at the moment saying that you have to operate to this code of practice to be able to bid their deal. Again, it's not a standard currently. It's not enforceable. It's not an accreditation. It's just a code of practice that's voluntary. So they can't tell you you have to do it. And actually, you wouldn't win currently if you did, because there are lots of companies that are doing things that are more mature than this as it stands today. So no. I don't think so. Do you have a link to the document? Done that. I think I just got a new question. Very helpful. Thank you. So finished a couple of minutes early, I think. So thank you very much, everybody. As I say, please don't bully people about this thing or get too het up about it. It's people trying to do the right things for our discipline. It should be applauded. It's a positive move. It's a great idea. It's just like all of these things. No one's ever going to get it right first time, are they? So we as a community, you all have a responsibility, I think, to feed back how you feel about it. So please do read the document yourself. Like I say, it's probably a 1 hour read end to end, 2 hours if you're going to comment on it and things. And do provide feedback to APMP and or BSi, because we could do with some tweaks, obviously, what we've talked through. But it is a positive step, and do reach out if we can help you. If you're here today because you need things to change, do reach out. I'm sure at very least I can give you some pointers, but ideally we can do some work together. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great weekend when you get to it, and we'll see you next time. I will be in touch about a future webinar. Thank you.